computer is picking up a strange signal. Here, sir, you better take a look at it.
Hello, and welcome to episode 129 of Life Through a Prism with your host, Rob Tierney. In this podcast, we may look at LGBTQIA+, disability, or pop culture. In this episode, we're going to look at pop culture with an article from thatparkplace.com entitled Ghostbusters 2016 Director Claims Next James Bond Should Be American Woman Sydney Sweeney. Written by Marvin Montenaro, dated the 11th of April 2026. Could Sydney Sweeney actually be cast as James Bond? Paul Feig, the director behind 2016's all-female Ghostbusters reboot, is reportedly backing the idea that the next James Bond should not simply be a woman, but an American woman. Yes, really. According to a report published by The Sun, Feig said, "I'd rather Sydney be the next Bond." He then doubled down with, "There have been some cool Bond girls, but come on, let her be the super spy. She's great." Well, that's certainly one opinion, but it's also one that runs headfirst into what James Bond has always been, a British male character whose cinematic identity is deeply tied to the UK. Bond is not some blank slate action role that can be endlessly reskinned to fit whatever modern Hollywood trend is floating around that week. He is one of the most recognisable characters in film history, and that identity is a big reason the franchise endured for generations. Paul Feig is a familiar voice in Hollywood's remake and recast culture. What makes Feig's comment land with a thud is not just the idea itself, it is who is saying it. This is the same filmmaker who directed the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot, a film that famously replaced the original male team with a female cast and became one of the most decisive franchise reworks of the modern age. Sony pushed the project hard. The media framed much of the backlash in predictable terms, and yet audiences still largely rejected it. The film underperformed commercially relative to its cost and marketing push, and it left the brand in an awkward place before Sony later pivoted back toward legacy continuity. So when Feig now suggests James Bond should be turned into Sydney Sweeney, it is hard not to notice a pattern here. Hollywood keeps returning to the same, take an established male icon, swap out the identity at the core of the character, and act shocked when fans ask why the original concept was not good enough to stand on its own. James Bond is not supposed to be an American woman. This is the part that should not even be controversial. James Bond has historically been portrayed by men with strong ties to the UK and Ireland. Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig all fit within that tradition. The character is a British agent. The world of Bond is British. The iconography is British. Even when different actors brought different tones to the role, the core identity remained intact. That's why Feig's suggestion feels less like a serious creative vision and more like another round of Hollywood provocation masquerading as innovation. If a studio wants to build a female spy franchise around Sydney Sweeney, it can do that. There is nothing stopping Hollywood from creating a new character, a new mythology, and a new world tailored to her strengths. But trying to fold that into Bond isn't bold. It's nothing more or less than brand vandalism. Sydney Sweeney's name carries weight, but that doesn't make her Bond. Sweeney, of course, has growing industry clout, and there's no question she is one of the biggest young stars in Hollywood right now. Ryan McCormick told Fox News Digital that Sweeney has already arrived and has had a sustained level of relevancy for at least 3 years. He also argued, "On the contrary, I think that the Bond series would benefit more from Sweeney than vice versa." That may be true in terms of celebrity buzz, but celebrity buzz and character fit are not the same thing. Sweeney, being a star, does not magically make her James Bond, any more than a popular actor automatically becomes Batman, Indiana Jones, or Sherlock Holmes, just because social media thinks it would be quote-unquote interesting. Some characters have defined parameters. Bond is one of them. Dave Quast, another expert quoted in the report, said, "There's a huge distinction between being Bond and being a Bond girl," he added. "If she were cast as Bond, it would elevate her profile significantly rather than limit it. Sure, but it would also torch one of the clearest character identities in cinema." Hollywood keeps confusing subversion with good storytelling. This is the real issue underneath it all. For years now, major studios have acted as though, quote-unquote, checking things up is automatically the same thing as making something better. Sometimes it works, often it does not. And when it fails, the industry usually learns absolutely nothing from the experience. That's why Feig backing the idea of an American female Bond stands out. It is not just a random hot take. It's another example of the same worldview that has repeatedly produced franchise fatigue, fan alienation, and expensive disappointment. You don't preserve iconic characters by stripping away what made them iconic in the first place. And no, that doesn't mean Sydney Sweeney is the problem. She isn't. The problem is the increasingly stale Hollywood instinct to treat legacy franchises like interchangeable IP shells, rather than stories with actual identity, history, and audience expectations. Bond doesn't need to be refined to stay relevant. James Bond has survived for decades because the franchise has been willing to evolve without abandoning its foundation. Different eras, different tones, different leading men, different supporting casts, sure, but still Bond. That's the balance Hollywood keeps failing to understand. A franchise can modernise without self-destructing. It can adapt without pretending its past no longer matters. What it shouldn't do is chase headlines by wrapping a classic character into something fundamentally different and then calling that progress. If Feig really believes Sydney Sweeney should be the next Bond, he's free to say it. But audiences have seen this kind of thinking before. They know where it tends to lead. And in Feig's case, they've already watched one famous reboot built on that exact mentality crash into a wall. James Bond isn't broken. He doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to remain James Bond. My thoughts. Just before I end today's episode, let's just think what it would be like if strong female character franchises from both the past and present were swapped. Charlie's Angels could become Charles's Angels, Cagney and Lacey became Jack and Jim, or Lara Croft became Larry Croft. Would there be enthusiasm for this? No, I don't think so, because then there would be outcries of misogyny and patriarchy. What do you think? Would you be excited to see a Jamie Bond? Or should Hollywood stop destroying franchises because it's the in thing at the moment? Let's have a conversation. Till next time, take care, and bye for now.